Good. Krishna is the source of memory. That's in chapter 15, text 15. If you ever wondered where memory comes from, it is, where does memory come from? You ever thought about where your memory comes from? Because sometimes there's no memory, isn't it? So a lack of memory or memory. But both of them come from the same place.
Okay.
Where do you reckon memory comes from? Chapter 15, text 15. Krishna says that memory comes from me, and forgetfulness comes from me, and knowledge comes from me. So he says that jnanam aponam cha. That knowledge, remembrance, smritir, jnanam smritir aponam cha. That knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness comes from me. So that's the source of everything. The source of everything. Okay, so who wants to read? Who's ready to read the English translation? So this is chapter 4, text 33, the translation.
O chastiser of the enemy, the sacrifice performed in knowledge is better than the mere sacrifice of material possessions. After all, O son of Paratha, all sacrifices of work accumulate in transcendental knowledge.
Welcome, Josh. Okay, O chastiser of the enemy. Who's that?
Maya.
Hello. Sorry, I was walking.
Hey, Josh, how are you?
Good.
Good. Who's the chastiser of the enemy? Who's speaking? Who's speaking this verse?
Krishna.
Remember, there's only two people in this conversation. It's not
Right.
You got a 50% chance of getting it right. So this is Krishna speaking to Arjuna. So Arjuna, Krishna's addressing Arjuna as Parantapa. Parantapa means chastiser of the enemy. How would you like to be called? Hey, Gulshan, no, chastiser of the enemies. That's how you address a warrior. Because that's the duty. One of the duties of a warrior, of a military man, is to chastise or punish the enemies, right? At the time of the wartime, two opposing parties. So there's some chastising going on, and one group's going to come out on top, and one's not. So this is their duty. It's not that they like doing it. Don't think also, well, yeah, we have to explain it a bit, but don't think that's the main purpose of a military man, a kshatriya, is just he enjoys fighting and wants to chastise people. But if you look at break down the meaning of the word kshatriya, so that warrior class, the leader class, political class, the kshatriyas, chat means hurt, K-S-A-T. So that means comes from a word meaning to hurt, but then triate, the second part comes tra from triate, means to deliver. Like for example, mantra, the same, right? Kshatriya, so that, and then mantra. So man means the mind, and tra means to free, to deliver. So mantra is that sound which frees your mind, which delivers your mind from all the anxieties and confusion and ignorance and so forth. So delivers the mind, so frees the mind. So the kshatriya means those persons that protect people from being hurt, or deliver people from being hurt, free people from being hurt. That's their real intention. Those people, they can't stand seeing the citizens suffering and unhappy or being exploited or being abused. So they step in and they'll fight those people. They'll chastise those people that are acting like enemies. They'll chastise those people that are acting like enemies to the honest citizens, to the general masses. You know, if someone tries to, you know, attack people's family or their take over their house or steal their property or something, then they'll chastise those people. As we say, rogues and thieves. So Krishna uses the word miscreants. So it's a word we don't hear very often in English, miscreant. But, you know, very low-class person that's always engaged in ignorant activities and always very lustful and greedy and angry and, you know, the sort of demoniac kind of class. You can read that in the 16th chapter, is talking about the divine and demoniac natures. Of course, ultimately, is anyone demoniac? In the ultimate sense, is anyone a demon?
No, I think so.
Of course, we may act in that capacity, you know, but the symptoms are, of course, you know, lust, greed, anger, envy, pride. This is all demoniac qualities. But actually, ultimately, we're all pure souls. We're all pure spiritual souls, full of love and happiness and eternal and fully conscious and everything like that. But because we've become conditioned by the three modes of material nature, by this, especially the modes of ignorance and passion, if we become conditioned by ignorance and passion, we take on these demoniac qualities. So it's just a temporary imposition, an imposition over us. It's a covering over the soul that we behave like a demon. But as like this says in the Bible, right, should hate the sin and not the sinner. Hate the sin and not the sinner. There's a difference between the sin and the sinner. It's not one, it's two. Don't think it's just one. No, there's the person within, the sinner, is completely separate from the external behavior, the sin. And it can be rectified. Actually, the sinner is a pure soul that's been covered up by illusion, by ignorance and acting in sinful ways. But that can be changed. That can be changed. Ultimately, the soul is not part of this material world and all these crazy activities that go on here. Just temporarily in a dream-like state of illusion, we're acting in so many ridiculous ways. But it's just like a dream, isn't it? Like in a dream, so many crazy things may go on in the dream. But when you wake up out of your nightmare, what happened? I was doing all this crazy stuff. And you wake up and you realize that didn't happen. It's just a dream.
What about like demons like Hiranyakashipu and things like that? Didn't they, in the womb, weren't they already demons or something? Didn't she hold them in for like 100 years or...
Yes.
You know, what about demons like that? They're still...
No, they're not. Actually, they were pure devotees of Vishnu from the spiritual world, from Vaikuntha. They were actually cursed by 4 other devotees called the Kumaras, the 4 Kumaras, Chatu Kumaras. They were cursed to take birth in the material as demons. But they were actually 2 doorkeepers in Vaikuntha called Jai and Vijay. So Jai and Vijay, 2 pure devotees. See what I mean? You know, we're ultimately we're all pure souls, but we're just taking on different roles. Yeah. Another time, not another time, but who was that famous Shakespeare? Right? Shakespeare said, "We are but actors on a stage." Isn't it? We're just acting out different roles. Okay, you act out the role of a demon in this life. I'll act out the role of a devotee. You know, like that, or I'll act the role out of a good person, you act the role of a bad person, or you act out the role of a man, I'll act out the role of a woman, you know, of an animal or whatever, just playing different roles. But ultimately, we're all pure spirit souls. So with spiritual vision, the pure devotee can actually see that. He doesn't so much see the external, oh, this is a sinful person, this is a black or white or whatever, but he sees the soul, that eternal soul. And that's called Samadarshana, equal vision. We talked a little bit about that, Samadarshana, equal vision, about seeing the soul, not so much getting caught up with the externals. Of course, we do recognize what someone's doing, that, okay, they're a pure spirit soul, but now they're acting as a demon, and this person is lying and cheating and raping and pillaging and murdering and doing all kind of crazy stuff. So what are you going to do? You're just going to say, oh, he's a pure soul, and you're going to ignore all that and not do anything? No. Actually, duty is, you have to do something. If someone's misbehaving, that has to be checked. Otherwise, it creates, chaos in society, and it interferes with this whole process of developing transcendental knowledge. How's your transcendental knowledge going to awaken if there's people running around all the time, killing and raping and pillaging and everything like that, and you're so afraid and scared and you can't go anywhere and like that? It's going to be very difficult. So there has to be some order in society. There has to be some social kind of structure and order to keep the peace, so that souls can come out of ignorance and can rise up to the spiritual awareness and everything. So to keep that order in society, that peace, then there's the Kshatriyas there. So if someone does step over the line and break the laws and hurt other people, then they'll come up to you and say, hey mate, you better stop that, otherwise I'm going to chop your head off, like that. So give you a kick up the backside. So that's also necessary, and they would do that as a matter of duty. So Arjuna's in that class. He's the upholder of the law. He's in that Kshatriya class. So they are upholding the law. They understand what the laws of the Supreme Being are, and they uphold those laws, the Vedic instructions. They make sure that people follow it. The Brahmanas, they fully understand the laws of the Supreme, but they don't administer it. They have the knowledge, and they tell that knowledge to the Kshatriyas, to the leaders. Like the priests, the Brahmanas, they would go to the king, or like, modern day equivalent is like the prime minister or whatever, the president, and tell them, this is what God wants. You have to do this, and this, and don't do that, don't do that, don't do that. So the Brahmanas know all that, but they can't enforce it. Well, I mean, not necessarily they can't, but generally they don't, because they're so focused on learning this knowledge and then giving the knowledge to others. They don't have time to be enforcing it. And also generally Brahmanas, the teacher class, are physically not very strong, whereas the warrior class, obviously they tend to be physically very strong, so they can enforce it. They can enforce the knowledge the Brahmanas are giving, and keep people on the right track, so they would follow spiritual principles like that. So that's Arjuna, and Krishna's encouraging Arjuna to chastise the enemies. Because remember, Arjuna, he wanted to back out of his job, didn't he? No, I don't want to chastise these people. They're not my enemies, they're my family. This is a lot of my family on the other side. They're not my enemies. I'm not going to chastise them. Normally, of course, Arjuna had no trouble whatsoever to chastise enemies. But this scenario is a bit of a hard one for Arjuna to swallow, because it's not really just enemies on the other side, but relatives and guru and senior people that he respected and things like that. So this was a difficult one, but Krishna's trying to incite Arjuna to do this and rise above this bodily identification, because this is really ignorance, that Arjuna is playing the role of an ignorant person, and just looking at it from the bodily point of view. Oh, it's my family, isn't it? This is bodily identification, just related to the body. Well, you can kill someone because they're not your family, but if they're your family, you can't kill them. And it's just, what is it? Just based on the body. Just based on the body. And what Krishna, of course, explained as well, that even if the body is killed, the person's not killed, or the soul can never be killed. So there's a whole lot of background behind this. It's not an ordinary war. This is directly done under the orders of the Supreme Being. It had to happen. It was required that this battle take place for the benefit of everyone. Okay, so that's the chastise of the enemy, Arjuna. So the sacrifice performed in knowledge is better than the mere sacrifice of material possessions. So before we get into this, does anyone want to say anything about that? Anyone has any questions about what I've just said about the role of a Kshatriya in chastising enemies? Did that make sense what I said? Anyone's confused? Okay, that's good. Okay, so remember we've gone through a whole list of different kinds of sacrifices, and sacrifices requires some work. There was always some activity. It's not just a belief, it's a kind of work and activity. So there's different kinds of activities. Remember, it's activities done with the body, activities done with the mind, activities done with the intelligence, with the soul, like that. So in the first of the list, it looked about sacrifice of one's possessions, how one can give away or sacrifice possessions. Like people, give to the Salvation Army, right? Or something like that. You give away your possessions and then they'll distribute it to the poor people. So you give some charity of possessions to the poor, some food, some clothing, some educational materials, whatever like that, some kind of material possessions. But here, Krishna's saying better than that, so there's different kinds of sacrifices, but the better kind of sacrifice is a sacrifice performed in knowledge. So better than just doing a sacrifice with your body and giving away something, some mechanical kind of process. Better is if you do a sacrifice with a higher understanding, with knowledge. Not opposite to that would be doing a sacrifice in ignorance. It means you don't really know what you're doing, but you're just doing a ritual. You're just doing a ritual. Oh, my parents, are waving the incense around, isn't it? In the arti, we have in the Indian culture, they have artis where you wave incense stick around and wave a ghee lamp and wave a conch shell with water in it and wave some flowers around and a peacock fan and so forth. So, and you can wave all that around, but I bet your bottom dollar, most people that are doing it in Indian families or whatever, they may not really know what they're doing, why they're doing it. They don't really know why they're doing it. They're working with their body, but they don't really have an understanding about why they're doing it. But here it's mentioned that more better than just sacrificing with your body is with some achieving knowledge, with achieving some knowledge or sacrificing in knowledge. Slowly gaining some knowledge and coming to that platform of knowledge. And Krishna is saying here, all sacrifices of work culminate in transcendental knowledge. So that should be the end result as we're performing sacrifices, as slowly we're getting more and more knowledge. More and more knowledge. And he's saying transcendental knowledge. That's the goal where we want to get to. So why is knowledge so important? Someone asked you, why do we need transcendental knowledge? What would you say? It's related to why we're in the material world. Why are we in the material world? Are we pretty smart to be here?
No.
What does it mean if you're in the material world? What happened to Bob? We lost Bob somehow, huh? He disappeared.
We want the knowledge to dissolve our ignorance.
Yeah. We want knowledge to counteract, to dissolve. That's a good word. To dissolve the ignorance. That's actually the reason why the soul remains in the material life after life is because of ignorance. So we need to dissolve that ignorance, and the way to do that, the complete opposite, diametric opposite to ignorance is knowledge. So In Sanskrit, there's a word avidya. Avidya means no knowledge or ignorance, and the opposite to that is vidya. Vidya means knowledge, and you put an A in front of it, is avidya, means ignorance or no knowledge. So we want to get this avidya is what's causing our suffering. We're suffering because of, what's the reason? Avidya, because of ignorance. If you get rid of the ignorance, then you'll remove the suffering. And of course, that's what we want, right? We don't want to suffer. We want to be happy. And the opposite to suffering is, to be happy. So the only way we can be happy is you get rid of the suffering. The only way you can get rid of suffering is because of ignorance. And there's something in between the ignorance and the suffering. There's one thing, which I mentioned before, which is in between ignorance and suffering. What actually is causing the suffering? Remotely, the ignorance is, but there's one thing that we do. When we are ignorant, what do you tend to do? Pretty crazy stuff, right? Sex, drugs, rock and roll. You ever heard of that before? Meat eating, intoxication, illicit sex, and gambling. So these are this is called papa, or sinful activities. Or we say, bad karma. So vikarma, we read about that before. Remember there's akarma, vikarma, and karma. So the karma is pious activities, vikarma is sinful activities, and akarma means that's activities that you do in devotion as a service to the Lord, and there's no reaction. So it's like you didn't do anything. That's akarma. So it's akarma and karma. Karma is pious activity, means you follow the rules, the directions of the scriptures. And vikarma means you disobey the rules, you go against the rules of the scriptures. That's sinful activities. And if you do sinful activities, because of ignorance, you do sinful activities, then the result of that is suffering. So remember, the first thing, the cause of us being in the material is ignorance. And in ignorance, what do? We tend to do sinful activities or vikarma. And as a result of the vikarma, you get to kick up the bum. Then you get suffering. Material nature punishes. And we see a fair bit of that around. Has anyone seen any suffering around the world lately? and it comes in different forms, right? In the forms of coronavirus, in the forms of it's bloody cold or too hot, or there's hurricanes, tsunamis, the mosquito bites you, the dog bites you, the husband bites you, the wife, whatever, that we get hurt from different sources. Different, there's divorce and so many things, and all kind of, and the taxes, and all kind of, we lose all our money, and the house burns down, and this goes on and on. Of course, it comes in three categories of suffering. It's called adhyatmic klesha, adhidaivic klesha, and adhibautic klesha. So these are three categories of suffering. So adhyatmic klesha, that's miseries coming from the body and the mind, from the atma, from the body and the mind, because atma can refer to the body, the mind, or the soul. So in this case, it means the body and the mind. So the misery is coming from the body and the mind. Of course, you have heaps of bodily ones. I don't have to explain that. You get a backache, a toothache, whatever sort of things, a stomachache. And then mind, of course, is a big thing these days. There's depression and stress and anxiety and loneliness and so many mental problems. And then miseries. And then there's daivic klesha, that's miseries coming from the daiva, from the demigods. So they're in control of everything. So that means too much rain or not enough. We had that in Australia, right? 4 years you didn't have hardly any rain. So and then you might have too much. Like Kalia told me, they had heaps of rain at the farm, so they had a big flood. So there might be not enough or too much, or it's too hot or too cold, or like I said, hurricanes, tsunamis, earthquakes, all kind of stuff like that, natural disturbances. And then there's adhibautic klesha. That means miseries from other living entities. That means, your neighbors give you a hard time, some stranger, even family members, give trouble. The politician, your boss at work, it goes on and on, other living entities. So like I said, the dog, once I got bitten in the leg by a dog, that was pretty miserable. So that was another living entity affected, or you might get bitten by a mosquito and you get malaria. So, you know, like that. So there's so many different things. And these are all different reactions to vikarma, to sinful activities, which we did that because of ignorance. So now this is pretty far out what I'm going to tell you. That most of our life, we're in the blame game. I'm suffering because of what he did, what she did, what they did. This in the past went wrong because of them, or we point the finger everywhere else. But in Vedic culture, what do we do? Where do we point the finger? I'm suffering because of what I have done in the past. Of course, the instrument for the suffering will be someone else or nature. But why that particular suffering came to you through that instrument was because of something you have done in the past. So ultimately, we are the cause of our own suffering. Means it's impossible for anyone to suffer if they haven't done anything wrong in the past. And then you have the whole thing, right? Why do bad things happen to good people? Yeah, because that good person, maybe even before this life, could have been a really bad person. You know, and it took a little while for the reaction to come, because the reactions don't always happen immediately following the sinful deed. Sometimes there might be a delayed reaction. And of course, it's not fully, 100% bad, 100% good, anyone, isn't it? We all do some good things. Even the worst kind of, gang member or whatever, sometimes he might help an old granny across the road too. So he might do a few good things as well. So he's going to get some good results out of that as well. So it's all a mix. And, what are you going to get first? That's not up to you to decide. Are you going to get the results of the good things first, or the results of the bad things first, or what's the order? That's up to higher controllers to decide those things. We had one case of one very pious king a long time ago named Nurga, NRGA. And he was such a pious king. He gave away more cows in charity to qualified brahmanas than there are stars in the sky or grains of sand on the earth. Basically unlimited. And giving away cows to brahmanas, especially, because generally brahmanas don't have much, so because they're so dedicated to helping other people in spiritual knowledge, they don't have time to work for money and stuff. So generally brahmanas are very poor, and they're very valuable members of society. So for giving charity of cows to brahmanas is a very pious activity. So he did so many pious deeds, and he did a lot of other good things too. He did one bad thing in his life. Only one bad thing. What was that? One time he gave away a cow to a brahmana, and the cow walked back into his herd. He gave it away, and the cow came back to him. And unknown to him, he gave it away, the same cow, to another brahmana. And I don't know how they figured it out, but the two brahmanas started fighting. This is my cow. Oh, this is my cow. No, it's mine. No, it's mine. So they started fighting, and they couldn't resolve it. So they went back to the king and said, "Hey, mate, what's going on? You gave the same cow to both of us. We want this cow. Both of us want the cow." So obviously, what is he going to do? He can't cut in half. So what did he do? He said, "Look, you give me the cow back. I'll give each of you 10,000 cows." They wouldn't accept it, because that had been given to them, to both of them. That cow, they wanted that. They didn't care about the number of the cow or anything like that, but that it had been given. He had to keep his word. That's a very important thing in Vedic culture. If you give a promise, if you give your word something, you can't take it back. That's it. Better you die than you break your promise. So he'd given that and like that. So it wasn't really his fault in one sense, but still he was held accountable for that. So they both walked off and very unhappy. So the reaction of that came at the time of death. So years later, then he died. And then Judgment Day, right? So then he was put in front of Yamaraj and said, hey, mate, what do you want? The results of your good work or the results of your bad work first? And he said, well, he was thinking, I've done a lot of good and I haven't done much bad. I can't even think what bad I did. So let me get the bad out of the way, then I can enjoy without any worries. Because you don't want to be enjoying now, right? And you're worried about in the future I have to suffer. That would disturb your happiness, right? So he wanted to get any bad stuff out of the way first, so then he can enjoy without any disturbance. So, and then Yamaraj said, Tatastu, so be it. And he took birth as what? As a lizard. That's suffering. He took birth as a lizard, not just a lizard, but where? In the bottom of a dried up well. What a life, huh? To be born as a lizard in the bottom of a dried up well, stuck in the bottom of a dried up well. So it's very powerful. There's reactions to our misdeeds. So, he might you might blame someone else, but ultimately it comes back to us. So what we do in Krishna consciousness is you take responsibility. You're accountable. You take responsibility for all of this suffering that's come to you. Don't blame anyone else anymore, because as soon as you get into this blaming other people, it just disturbs the mind. It disturbs the mind. You can't focus on what you really should be focusing on, which is this: getting out of suffering, transcendental knowledge, hearing from the spiritual master, connecting with the supreme like that. Otherwise, if you never take responsibility and it's always other people's fault, you can never progress. You're always stuck in the past. I'm suffering because of what they did to me, this and that, and so many things, and it's the politician's fault, and it's my family's fault, and everyone else, and like that. And that way, we're stuck on the mental platform. We're always stuck on the mental platform. And rather than if you take responsibility for it, then just let it go. Then it's gone. It's done. It's like a closed door. It's like a closed door. It's just part of the past. Let it go. It's dead. It's gone. And then you move on. And then you move on. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I heard a beautiful saying that yesterday holds tomorrow hostage. Pretty cool, huh? Think about that. You might not. Do you get it? Do you get it? Yesterday holds tomorrow hostage.
So whatever you're doing yesterday basically impacts how your today will be. Basically.
Well, you're living in the past. You never get to tomorrow. You never get to the future. You're always in the past. You never move on. You're held up by past events. You're in your mind. You're always living in your mind. Oh, this, because of this, I can't do anything, and I can't get anywhere else. And you're blaming others and criticizing and everything. You're just stuck up with the past. So this is very important to free the hostage. To free the hostage, you have to. That's why. As well as forgiving others, because remember, they're just instruments. Remember, they're instruments for our own bad karma. Whether it's coming from the sufferings coming from the natural disasters, or the politicians, or the dog, or the family members, or neighbors, or boss, or whatever, they're instruments for our own past misdeeds, for our own bad karma. So as well as forgiving them and forgetting about it, but we have to forgive ourselves. We have to forgive ourselves as well. That we've done all those crazy things which has caused us to suffer because we're in ignorance. So, but we have to be determined to get out of that ignorance. That's the real enemy, is this ignorance that's causing us to act in lust and greed and anger and envy and so forth. So we have to try to let bygones be bygones and move on. Very important to be in the present. That's the mode of goodness, to be in the present. It's difficult. It's not easy. And we're brought up in a culture of blame and lack of responsibility. But if we want to progress in spiritual life, or even just to become happier, because there's no way you can be materially happy, let alone spiritually happy, unless we learn to take responsibility for these things and move on. What do you think? Does that make sense? Anyone want to say anything about that? It's hard to digest. Hard to digest. We don't normally like to point the finger at ourselves, isn't it? We're so used to pointing at everywhere else. It's very humbling. And do you know what the very first, let's look at it right now. I was planning to do it a little bit later, but let's do it right now. 13th chapter, text 8 to 12. This is what Krishna says is the process of knowledge. Krishna is talking about knowledge as a process. Step by step by step by step process. So, and he explains knowledge to be like a ladder. Interesting. He explains knowledge to be like a ladder. And the first rung of the ladder in this 13th chapter, text 8, is it's 4 verses strung together. Is amanitvam madambitvam ahimsakshantirajvam. So the first one, amanitvam, is humility. When you realize that I'm suffering because of my own past activities, that's humbling. And if you remember that, then not all the time, otherwise you go a bit crazy. But if you remember some of the time, then that's very humbling. So if ever you're feeling a bit proud, because the second one says prideless, right? Pridelessness, humility and pridelessness means without pride, right? Prideless, so less pride. So if you ever got it feeling a bit proud and you want to make it less, then remember why you're stuck in this stupid material body, because of our own misdeeds. We turned our back on Krishna. You know, we're so stupid. We turned our back on the Supreme and thought we're very clever, we can enjoy without him. And we thought that we could take over all of Krishna's property and use it for our own enjoyment. That's mega sinful. You know, that's very sinful. Isn't it? To take someone else's property and use it for your enjoyment, that's sinful, isn't it? To whom does everything in this material world belong? Does it belong to us? Me, it's mine. We'd like to think so. It actually belongs to the Supreme Being. Remember in the 7th chapter, we haven't got to that yet, but I've talked about it a few times. Earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, false ego is all Krishna's energy. It's all Krishna's property. You won't find anything else in this material except for those things. So then that's all Krishna's energy, and we're just using it for our enjoyment. So if you take someone else's property, what's that called? That's called a thief. And a thief is very sinful. So, you know, we're all getting a reaction. We're all getting reactions for all these different things. Of course, if you use those material things, it's not that you can't use material things, but if you use them for his pleasure, then you're not a thief. Then you're not a thief. If you make a house for his pleasure, and if you turn the eating process is also for his pleasure, and your talking is also for his pleasure, and your dancing is for his pleasure, and your making money is for his pleasure, and you're having sex is for his pleasure, everything. That's all. You can still use material things, but instead of for our pleasure, for his pleasure, then you're not a thief anymore, and then you're not held, you know, as a you know, accountable for that. Food for thought. So, you know, this is knowledge. So this is what it talks about, and so it's a whole process there. Do you want to? Let's read through. Who wants to read through? Just read through all those. It's about 20 items mentioned there.
Yeah. Humility, pridelessness, non-violence, tolerance, simplicity, approaching a bona fide spiritual master, cleanliness, steadiness, self-control, renunciation of the object of the sense gratification, absence of false ego, the preparation of evil of the birth, death, old age, and disease, detachment, freedom from entanglement with the children, wife, home, and the rest, even my mindedness, aimed at pleasant and unpleasant event, constant and unalloyed devotion to me, aspiring to live in the solitary place, detachment from the general mass of people, accepting the importance of the self-realization and the philosophical search of the absolute truth. All these are declared to be knowledge, and beside these, whatever they may be, is ignorance.
So what are the last thing you said? Besides this, everything is ignorance.
Yeah, that's right.
How come Krishna didn't put in that list of knowledge becoming an engineer and a doctor and an electrician and a plumber and like that? That's not there. What do you mean that's not knowledge? And maths and...
That's just a title.
Yeah, so in the purport, Prabhupada says some pretty far out stuff, and it's a long purport, but in the beginning of the purport, he says that knowledge is not the interaction of the material elements. See, we take that's what we call knowledge. You know, everything you learn at school and all the books and most of the books in the library is just an interaction of matter, right? It's everything. It's either all the subject to do with the 20, Krishna, Prabhupada mentions there 24 elements. There's 24 material elements. Earth, water, fire, air, ether, space, mind, intelligence, false ego. Then you've got the 5 knowledge acquiring senses, the eyes, the nose, the mouth, the tongue, and the ears, and touch. So you've got the 5 knowledge acquiring. Then you've got the 5 working senses, the karmendriya. You've got your mouth does work. You've got your the mouth, then your arms, your legs, and your anus and genitals. So those are the 5 working senses. So, and then you've got the 5 sense objects. So that's the objects for your 5 knowledge acquiring senses. So the eyes, the object is form. The object for the ears is sound. The object for the tongue is taste. The object for the nose is smell, and the object for touch is that you know the object that's being touched, that you know whatever you're touching. So those 24 elements, that's normally what we think of as knowledge. What you're learning about in school is all those, something related with those 24 things. But Prabhupada says that knowledge is not the interaction of these 24 things, which is what we learn at school and everything, but it's how to get out of it, how to get free from matter, not an understanding of matter. And usually, why do we want to understand this material world? Because we want to enjoy it. We want to exploit matter. That's why we're going into understanding it for the purpose of enjoying it and exploiting it. But what Prabhupada's saying knowledge is, and what Krishna's saying, is that real knowledge is how to get the soul out of the entanglement of the material world. That's knowledge. Knowledge is how to get out of the material world. And another essential point that's mentioned in the purport, which is in this section what we're going to be coming up to now, is also where do you get the knowledge from? So what is knowledge? Knowledge is that process that is helping you to disentangle yourself, to free yourself from the material world. Okay, so that's what knowledge is. And then where do you get that knowledge from? And that's actually mentioned in that list of 20 and that's approaching a bona fide spiritual master. So we know what knowledge is, how to get out of this material world, the process how to get out of the material world, and then where do you get the knowledge from? That is from the spiritual master. And like I said, you know, it can be many people. So this is a very fundamental part of the yoga system, of the sacrifice system, is to have the association with persons that have transcendental knowledge, and we want to get that from them. And then there's a whole process too. How do you get the knowledge from them? Because you can't like just download it like you put the stick into a computer. They're a person, you know, and you can't like make it come out. And you also have to be in a particular frame of mind to be able to assimilate it. So there's a whole body of knowledge about how to get that knowledge from the spiritual master too. So we're going to be discussing a bit about that. And then ultimately, what does the knowledge culminate in? Okay, you got out of the material world, yippee. Then what happens then? You're in the material, you're suffering, and then you get this knowledge and you get out of the material world. Gita, were you saying something?
No.
Have you got a bit of a cold, have you?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a shame.
Yeah.
Better soon.
Yeah, I think so.
That's a bit of the adhyatmic klesha, about the suffering from the body, right?
Yeah.
We all have to go through it, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So what does it say in that purport? It says it culminates in, I'll just read the exact, in the first, it's a long paragraph. In the first paragraph it says, of all the descriptions of the process of knowledge, the most important point, so this is about 12 lines into the purport, the most important point is described in the first line of the 11th verse. Mai chanyani yogana bhaktir vyabhacharani. The process of knowledge terminates in the unalloyed devotional service to the Lord. So if one does not approach or is not able to approach the transcendental service of the Lord, then the other 19 items are of no particular value. But if one takes to devotional service in full Krishna consciousness, the other 19 items automatically develop within him. Wow. Wow. So the culmination, what is the culmination of knowledge? Is love for the Supreme, is bhakti. A loving relationship with the Supreme. That's the culmination. And is saying, if you don't achieve that point ultimately, if you don't get to that point ultimately, it has no value. All your knowledge has no value. Yes, Gita, were you going to say something?
Sorry, I was sort of going to answer. Well, I was going to try to answer. I was going to.
Yes, please go ahead, please.
Is to use that knowledge and love then for the for others, I guess.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah, so that's included. If you have love for the Supreme, automatically you love everyone.
Yeah.
And you see the Supreme within every living being, as well as the individual soul. There's the Supreme Soul Paramatma within everyone. So automatically, if you achieve that pure love for the Supreme, automatically you'll love everyone, and you'll be acting for the welfare of everyone. You'll be the best welfare worker. You'll always be trying to help people. But especially how you're going to help people will be you're going to try to connect them with the Supreme. Because that's real welfare work. You know, just giving some, like we're talking about, giving some possessions, like giving some food, giving some clothing or whatever, giving some notepads and pencils and stuff to the kids is not the ultimate welfare work, because it's only temporary. It's only temporary benefit. But if you can help other souls also to connect with the Supreme, then you've done a permanent benefit. You've given the permanent benefit, because they'll also get free from the material entanglement and get liberated from the material world. So best is to, that's the best welfare, is to also give people knowledge and elevate them up to the spiritual platform too. Because you feed the hungry person today, what's going to happen to him tomorrow?
Again hungry?
He's again hungry. Are you going to feed him every day for the rest of his life? I don't think so.
Teach him
Even
how.
if you could, he's going to die and take birth again. But what you can do, like if you give him blessed food, prasadam, you're feeding his body, but you're also liberating his soul. So you're doing both. That's pretty far out. Prasadam is pretty wonderful, because you're actually feeding the body, but you're also awakening the soul by giving him that sanctified food that's offered in sacrifice. If the food's offered in sacrifice, you're doing both. So that's really cool. So let's look at the 7th chapter, text 19. Whoever finds that first can read it out.
After many birth and a death, he who is actually in knowledge surrenders up onto me, knowing me to be the cause of all cause and all that is. Such a great soul is a very rare.
Yes. So this is the evidence or the result of complete knowledge. If someone has complete knowledge, bahunam janmanam ante gyanavan man prapadyate. So when gyanavan, full of gyan, full of knowledge, when the knowledge is full, then what will happen? Surrender. You surrender to the Supreme. That's the evidence that the person's knowledge is full. Until you surrender, that means your knowledge is not full. If it was full, you would surrender. But you haven't surrendered. So that's a sign that your knowledge is not yet full. Maybe it's 20% full, 50% full, 70%, 80%, 90%, but 100% full means no more ignorance. You're full of knowledge means no more ignorance, no space. You know, the glass is full of water, the oil can't fit in. So you're full of knowledge, no more ignorance. Well, the evidence of that is that you're fully enlightened, then naturally you're a surrendered soul. You're a surrendered soul. Prapadyante, prapanam, sharanam. Sharanam means surrender, or prapanam. You've taken shelter, you've surrendered to the Lord. So that's the sign that one is full of knowledge. And like it's mentioned, sometimes it takes many births. Bahunam janmanam mante. Ante means the end of janma. Janmanam means births. Bahuna means many. So many births at the end of many births. Slowly, every life we're learning a bit more knowledge, getting a bit more knowledge, bit more knowledge. Then after many births, when the knowledge is full, then surrender. And such a person is very rare. Generally, those people are not on every street corner that are full of knowledge. They're very rare. If you find one of those, you've hit the jackpot, mate. If you find a Gyanavan full of knowledge, then that one you should make friends and try to take benefit from their association, get some knowledge from them. They are full of knowledge. You want to get the knowledge from them, but the evidence that you want to find someone that's surrendered to the Supreme. That is the one that's full of knowledge. If they might say, you know, I have a lot of knowledge or whatever, but if they're not surrendered to the Supreme, they're not full. I mean, of course, you'll learn something, but according to their level of realization. Means if you find someone that has, 50% knowledge, then you can learn up to 50% from them. But you can't learn 70% from someone that's learned 50%, right? They can only teach you what they know. Right? But if you get someone that's full of knowledge, everything you can get from them. Everything. Like Prabhupada, right? You can, anything you want, you can get from Prabhupada. He knows everything. He doesn't know about some bug in the Amazon forest, but that's not what you need to know. Remember, what knowledge is those 20 items. So that you can get from him everything. Humility. Oh my God. You know, I watch videos about Prabhupada. He's the most humble person you'll never find. He's so humble. I mean, he's so great in the terms of his qualities, and yet in personal behavior, he's so humble. Oh my God, he's so humble. I'm going to have to finish soon, but one story came to mind about just to demonstrate Prabhupada's humility. That so Prabhupada arrived at an airport, and there was hundreds of devotees came to meet him at the airport, and they sat down in one area of the airport, and he started talking and like that, and they were doing kirtan and things like that, and then one old lady came to do some cleaning. That was her job, her duty. That's her dharma, to clean that part of the airport. And she called out, "Excuse me, can you please all move? I have to clean this place." One person out of that hundreds moved out of that place. You know who that was?
Prabhupada.
Prabhupada. Prabhupada was so humble that when that insignificant cleaner lady said, "Oh, can you all please move?" he immediately moved. And no one else moved. Well, after Prabhupada moved, then they moved. But they didn't move because she said for them to move. They only moved after they saw that he moved. But he was the most humble one. That he's just so obedient and so submissive. And he doesn't think I'm the big guru. Who are you telling me I have to move? No, I'm the big guru. I don't have to move. Don't tell me what to do. I'll tell you what to do. I'm the guru. No, he's so humble. He's like a servant of the servant. Very humble. Yeah. One time Prabhupada was explaining the 4 different classes in Vedic culture. You know, the Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, Sudras. So he said, you know, there's the first class explaining about that, second class, third class, fourth class. And the reporter that he was talking to, the reporter said, so Swamiji, which class are you in? Of course, the reporter was wanting to catch him, you know, saying that he's the first class, you know, he's the most intelligent class. And what did Prabhupada say? He said, I am 5th class. I'm a servant of all the classes. Prabhupada's so humble. So like that, we can get everything. So it's learning. So it's more like, you'll see these 20 items of knowledge is more like values and qualities rather than like information. We sort of think knowledge is like information, you know, just remembering all kinds of information and stuff like that. But it's more about your qualities and your behavior and your values. This is, you know, what's mentioned there. Like it's mentioned about ahimsa, being, you know, non-violent, and simplicity, these kind of cleanliness, isn't it? So it's talking, it's you know, knowledge is more about these kind of things rather than just knowing stuff, but about your behavior and your principles, your principles that you live by, and your behavior and qualities and what you value and these kind of things. Okay, so I have a few more minutes. So let's go back to our verse there in the 4th chapter, text 33. We can read the verse. Okay, Narendra, you want to read? 4th chapter, text 33.
Yeah, the purpose of all sacrifices is to arrive at the status of complete knowledge, then to gain release from the material miseries, and ultimately to engage in loving transcendental service to the Supreme Lord, Krishna consciousness. Nonetheless, there is a mystery about all these different activities of sacrifice, and one should know this mystery. Sacrifices sometimes take different forms according to the particular faith of the performer.
Yeah.
When once, sorry, you want me to stop?
No, keep going.
Okay. When one's faith reaches the stage of transcendental knowledge, the performer of the sacrifices should be considered more advanced than those who simply sacrifice material possession without such knowledge, for without attainment of knowledge, sacrifice remain on the material platform and bestow no spiritual benefit. Real knowledge culminates in Krishna consciousness, the highest stage of transcendental knowledge. Without the elevation of the knowledge, sacrifices are simply material activities. When, however, they are elevated to the level of transcendental knowledge, all activities enter onto the spiritual platform. Depending on differences in consciousness, sacrificial activities are sometimes called karma kanda or fruitive activities, and sometimes jnana kanda, knowledge in the pursuit of truth. It is better when the end is knowledge.
So there's two main divisions of sacrifices mentioned in the end. Karma kanda, fruitive activities. So it's people that like doing a sacrifice and they want to get some material benefit out of it. Some like for example, do some fire sacrifices to please some demigods, and then they're thinking that when they die, then they'll take birth in heaven, in the Swargaloka, in the heavenly planets, and they'll be able to drink somaras and have beautiful women, apsaras, to enjoy with and things like that. So they're just thinking about getting some result, some temporary benefits. So that means then they're pretty ignorant people. They're just thinking about some temporary benefits. But then there's the Jnana Kanda path. That's more about getting detachment from the material world. Detachment from the material world. You know, accumulating more and more transcendental knowledge. And the result of that is their, you know, letting go of sense gratification. You know, attraction to sense gratification, whether it's here on earth or in heaven, is a sign of ignorance. Anywhere in the material world, we can't really enjoy. It's a miserable situation for the soul. So that's quite ignorant to be doing activities to get more sense gratification. But it's a sign of more knowledge that you're becoming detached, slowly getting detached from sense gratification and trying to understand who you really are and that you're not part of this world. And but in the Jnana Kanda path, they haven't come to the realization of the Supreme yet. They're understanding that material life is suffering, and they're trying to let go of that sense gratification. So that's good. So that's better. So, but they're not on the spiritual platform yet. So you've got the materialistic platform, and then you've got detachment from the materialistic platform. And then you've got the positive spiritual life. You have a loving relationship with the Supreme. So there's 3 stages. Does that make sense? You're entangled in the material world, enjoying sense gratification. That's called karma kanda. Or you're trying to detach from that. By getting knowledge, you're trying to detach from that sense gratification in the material world, but you haven't yet got a positive relationship with the Supreme. Okay, you're just at the stage of trying to let go of all that. You're seeing that sense gratification causes suffering, so you're trying to let go of that. So that's called the Jnana Kanda. And then you've got the perfect stage, which is you've detached from the material world and you've become attached to the Supreme. You've become attached to Krishna consciousness. But that middle one, that where you're becoming detached from the material because you're getting knowledge, that's better than that karma kanda, where you're trying to enjoy, get some temporary benefits by doing some sacrifices to get some temporary benefits out of it, like that. Does that make sense?
Yes.
But if that jnani, if that person that's getting knowledge and getting detached doesn't achieve Krishna consciousness, remember, everything he's doing is no value. If he just stays on that middle stage, He's not trying to enjoy the material world, but he's not enjoying in the spiritual world. He's just in limbo. He's in nowhere land. He's in, what do you call it? No man's land. And you can't maintain on that platform for very long. You know, you're trying to let go of the material world, but you haven't found something to latch onto. So where are you? You're nowhere. So that's not a very safe platform to be on. And normally, many of those jnanis, they fall back down to being karmis again. You know, and some of them, if they can keep going up to becoming bhakti yogis, then they've made it like that. But what was mentioned, what Prabhupada said also in that other purport, was that if you achieve that loving relationship with the Supreme, automatically you get all the knowledge and detachment. That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. So how is it that just by doing devotional service, you automatically get knowledge and detachment? I'm going to have to take off in a minute, but I can leave you with that to meditate on. But how is it? I'll give you a clue. When you do some service for the Supreme, service for Krishna, bhakti, what happens? It like Gulshan. If I give you some really yummy food or something you really like, then what are you going to do? How are you going to feel about me?
Right. Yeah, of course. It's been great. It's like, you know, if you're given a good
You're going to give me your blessings?
Of course.
So, you know, if you
my best friend.
If you please someone, they're going to be very happy, and they're going to please you. They're going to want to reciprocate. So if you do something to please the Supreme, then the Supreme, you've attracted his attention, and the Supreme's going to do something for you. And what is he going to do for you? We've read about that before. He's in our heart. He gives us knowledge within our heart. That's in the 10th chapter. 10th chapter, text 10 and 11. This is some of the essential verse of the Bhagavad Gita. 10 and 11 in the 10th chapter, very important verse. He's in our heart. He's pleased when you do some service, and he enlightens you from your heart, and he destroys the ignorance in your heart. And then automatically you become detached. When he gives you the knowledge, the transcendental knowledge in your heart, after being pleased by you serving him, then automatically, after you've got the knowledge, you become detached. See, detachment follows knowledge. When you get knowledge, the result of knowledge is you're going to become detached from the material world. But the best way, the easiest way to get the knowledge is just to please the Supreme. But of course, who has the knowledge about the Supreme and trying to please him? We're in ignorance. So how do you start it off? That's the difficult bit. Starting it off, and that comes from next week's verse.
Yes, okay.
You have to approach the spiritual master. So that's where at the very start of it. When somehow or other, if you can hear from the person that has full knowledge, then it'll awaken the interest to do service. And then you do the service and the Lord's pleased. He gives you knowledge in your heart, and then you become detached from the material world. Then you're out of here. So thank you very much. My time's up.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank
Thanks,
you.
Abhay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Welcome. So that was a lightning session. I think that's my fastest session ever.
Is there a next Thursday will be a Prabhupada's appearance day? The class will be still remain or not?
Last one.
I'm
Last
not sure. I'm not sure. I mean, yeah, it's a wonderful day. Let's just see. I can't guarantee. I'll try my best. Yeah, we'll see. You guys might be busy too and things like that. So we'll just see what happens.
Temple.
I can't think right now. I have to jump on the plane in a minute.
Yeah,
So
Have a safe trip, Abhay Prabhu. Have a safe trip and wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. You too.
Haribol.
Haribol.
Second part of the class.
Take care.
Second part of the class.
Hey, I haven't seen your message yet, Bhaktimala. I mean, I know you sent a message, but I didn't see it.
You're on holidays now, so you got plenty of time. You can look at it.
Yeah, true.
Have a safe trip.
Yeah, thank you so much. All
Yeah.
right,
Okay.
all take care. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Bye.